The spot where her body was found is now marked by a police tent. It's about 50 yards from the main road here. This is an area known locally as a nature reserve. It's just next to a private housing estate. The woods themselves are popular with joggers and dog walkers.
May 31st, 2007. In Walton on Thames, Surrey, United Kingdom, a woman was reported missing. Kate Beagley had not shown up for work, and no one had heard from her. Her father, aware that she had gone out the night before, decided to visit her home to check on her. But when he arrived, she was nowhere to be found. She had also missed an important appointment. This was completely out of character for Kate, and her father, knowing this, immediately reported her missing to the police. However, it wasn't only the police who took action. Kate's friends joined the search efforts, putting up missing persons posters across the area, hoping someone would have seen something. At that time, Facebook was still in its early stages, but her friends quickly created a group to provide updates and share any information. 32-year-old Kate Beagley was described as a kind-hearted and loyal individual, always cheerful and full of life. She was the kind of person you could count on during tough times. Kate worked for a leading FTSE 100 company, and her dedication had earned her a senior position as the National Compliance Manager for Centrica, a major gas company. She had an extensive circle of friends, a love for travel, and a strong adventurous spirit. Known for her responsibility, she would never disappear without informing anyone of her whereabouts. Though Walton on Thames was a relatively peaceful town with little crime, it was still haunted by the memory of another tragic case, the infamous kidnapping and murder of Millie Dowler. Millie, a 13-year-old schoolgirl, had been abducted in Walton on Thames in March 2002. And her remains were discovered months later. The case shocked the nation, with the search for her killer making front-page headlines for years. It wouldn't be until 2011 that Levi Belfield was convicted of Millie's murder, along with 2 other murders and an attempted murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. At the time of Kate's disappearance, however, Millie's killer had not yet been apprehended. The police, aware of the public's fear and uncertainty, had to act swiftly to reassure the community and provide answers. Then, something alarming occurred that raised even more concern. Kate's friends had started receiving text messages from her phone, but they didn't sound like her. Everyone has a distinct way of typing and a unique pattern in their messages. However, the texts from Kate's phone were unlike her usual style, using words and phrases that she would never typically use. When the police searched her home, they found a second phone. Investigators from the Missing Persons Unit took a closer look at this phone and decided to contact some of the numbers stored on it. One number belonged to a man Kate had gone on a date with the night before she went missing. Her friends knew very little about him, except that his name was Karl. The two had met a few weeks earlier at a club in central London. Perhaps Kate had gone back to his place, but her family didn't believe that was likely. So, who exactly was Karl? His full name was Karl Taylor. He had lived alone in a 1-bedroom flat in Covent Garden for about 8 years. Although he had a criminal record, it wasn't something that immediately raised red flags. In 2002, he had been convicted of obtaining property by deception. That same year, he also attempted to take his own life by jumping off a bridge, but was talked down. His mother had pleaded with him to seek help, and he had spoken to psychiatrists by phone after that incident. Among the texts found on the phone, there was evidence that Karl and Kate had planned to meet. The first few hours after someone is reported missing are crucial for gathering evidence, and with little to lose and everything to gain, The police decided to call his number. To their surprise, Karl answered. He confirmed he had met Kate the night before, but claimed she had dropped him off at Twickenham and that he hadn't seen her since. However, this explanation didn't add up. When police spoke to his mother, she revealed something odd. She said that on the morning of May 31st, the day Kate was reported missing, Karl had arrived home in a new Volkswagen Golf, which she didn't recognize. He was also cleaning it. Karl explained that he had borrowed the car from a woman who needed it cleaned so she could take her children to school. But this explanation turned out to be a lie. The car was Kate's Volkswagen Golf, and now she was missing. If Karl had truly been dropped off and hadn't seen Kate again, why would he have her car? And if his story was innocent, why didn't he share this information right away when the police confronted him? The investigation into Kate's disappearance uncovered more troubling details. It wasn't just her Volkswagen that Karl Taylor had in his possession. He had also given his mother shopping vouchers at around 6:15 that morning, vouchers that clearly weren't his. They had come from Kate's glove box. Additionally, it was discovered that he had sold Kate's phone to one of his friends. Even more suspicious, Karl had been boasting about his new car. Further investigation revealed something even more alarming. Kate's car had been seen just before midnight on the 30th of May, driving across Chiswick Bridge, heading in the opposite direction from where Kate lived. The driving had been described as erratic, and a police officer had noticed it, prompting a check with the police national computer. With each passing hour, the situation was becoming more concerning. It was becoming increasingly clear that Kate had likely suffered serious harm. Karl Taylor, 27, was physically fit. Having trained in martial arts and working as a football coach and fitness instructor, he was strong and capable of overpowering someone. Kate, on the other hand, would have been no match for him. With this new information, the police decided it was time to bring Karl in for questioning. If there was any possibility this was all a misunderstanding, he now had a chance to explain. But when they called him, the man who had quickly answered earlier now refused to respond. When police call, the number usually shows up as no caller ID, which suggested Karl knew who was trying to reach him. The officers then decided to try a different approach and called him from a personal phone. This time, Karl answered. He repeated his earlier story but remained evasive, providing few details. The officers informed him that they would be traveling to London to take a statement from him, as his answers over the phone had not been reassuring. Karl then asked if they could meet him at a party he was attending that night at a flat in Holland Park. This request struck the officers as odd. A woman he had just gone on a date with had disappeared, and he was driving around in her car with no reasonable explanation, yet he was going about his night as if nothing had happened. When the officers arrived at the party, they took Karl into a separate room to speak with him. However, their concerns only grew stronger. Karl continued to be vague, answering questions reluctantly and not addressing the critical issues at hand. As more people arrived and alcohol began to flow, the situation became even more uncomfortable. It was far from an ideal setting for a police interview. Karl's behavior began to shift as well. He grew increasingly irritable and agitated. The officers, now worried for their safety, made the decision to arrest Karl and transport him back to Walton on Thames. Despite the growing concerns for the officers' safety, additional backup from the Metropolitan Police Force was called in, just in case. While waiting for the backup officers to arrive, the detective sergeant at the scene quickly came up with a reason to get Karl out of the flat and into their car. Unaware of what was unfolding, Karl calmly walked downstairs and got into the car. It was then that he was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping Kate Beagley. Karl was driven back to Walton on Thames and placed in a holding cell. The case was transferred to the major crime team, with Detective Chief Inspector Mark Preston taking charge. Time was of the essence. If they were going to have any chance of finding Kate, they needed to speak to Karl urgently. However, Karl's story remained unchanged. With no word from Kate and no trace of her whereabouts, the decision was made to arrest Karl again, this time on suspicion of her murder. He was interrogated once more, but this time he remained silent. Every question was met with the same response: no comment. The police managed to obtain a court order to extend his detention, granting them more time to question him. But Karl continued to refuse to speak. He wouldn't explain why he had Kate's car, nor why he had been seen on CCTV at a garage where he had topped up the fuel. Strangely, he only put in a single pound's worth of petrol. All of these puzzling details were beginning to paint a dark, albeit circumstantial, picture. What the police needed now was something more concrete. They needed Karl to speak up. With that in mind, he was returned to his cell, given time to think about all the evidence that had been presented. On Sunday night, Karl was allowed another phone call with his mother, and it was then that the decision was made to conduct another interview with him. Detective Chief Inspector Preston, who had been awake for more than 24 hours, decided to go home and try to rest. But the moment his head hit the pillow, his phone rang. It was the station. Karl Taylor had confessed. Not only had he confessed to the murder, but he also said he would take them to where Kate's body was. Karl's story was chilling. He admitted he had wanted Kate's car and had attacked her in order to take it. When Kate fought back, he repeatedly stabbed her. He told the police, "She pushed me away. She was grabbing me and I stabbed her in the throat. I kept cutting her in the neck because she was going for my face." For the officers, the story didn't add up. Karl was physically much stronger than Kate, and with his martial arts training, he could have easily overpowered her. Why would he need to use a weapon on someone he could have subdued without difficulty? The officers were not convinced. Karl claimed that after killing her, he took her body to a place near Watford in Hertfordshire. The police contacted Hertfordshire police for assistance, and an operation was set up to make sure Karl was filmed and recorded the entire way. This was crucial, as they didn't want to miss any evidence. They also needed to ensure that Karl didn't escape or pose any danger to others. As the night wore on, they followed Karl's directions to Watford. But doubts remained. Was this just another red herring? He led them to a car park at a local nature reserve, Oxy Woods, where it was eerily dark, and you could barely see your hand in front of your face. He then directed the officers to a patch of stinging nettles. One officer carefully circled the area, avoiding any obvious routes a killer might have taken. At 3 a.m. that morning, Kate's naked body was found. The scene was immediately secured, and crime scene examiners began the painstaking task of retrieving evidence. Kate's family released a statement, mourning their loss. Kate was a loving, thoughtful, dependable, loyal, and tremendously popular daughter, sister, granddaughter, godmother, and friend. She was devoted to her family and friends. Kate will be missed by everyone who knew her every day and in every way. Flowers were left at the crime scene, and many were deeply moved by her tragic death. One message read, "I never met you, but I feel like I have known you for a lifetime. My heart goes out to all those who were blessed with your love and friendship. The place is a sorrier place without you." Kate's injuries were severe, and decomposition had already begun due to the hot weather, so she could not initially be identified. DNA was used to confirm her identity. Her clothes had been removed, and her body had been washed. Karl later admitted he had tried to spiritually clean her and leave her exposed to the stars. Despite an extensive search, the police couldn't find the murder weapon or any of Kate's personal items. However, they later discovered that Karl had thrown the knife out of her car as he drove down the motorway after disposing of her body. Miraculously, the officers managed to find the murder weapon along with some of Kate's clothes. They also found bottles of water, which Kate had kept in her car, and some of these bottles had been used to wash her body. Her blood was found on the knife. The police needed to trace Kate's car, and Karl eventually revealed its location in Harlesden, London. They went there and found the car exactly where he said it would be. The post-mortem revealed the horrifying extent of Kate's injuries. She had suffered over 30 stab wounds to her neck, face, and head. The news was devastating for Kate's family and friends, who were left grappling with the brutal nature of her death and the violent way she had been taken from them. Though Karl had confessed to the murder, he pled not guilty in court. He claimed that he had acted in self-defense and even suggested that Kate had taken her own life. To strengthen their case, the police decided to return to the nature reserve where Kate's body was found, hoping to uncover more evidence. They believed the murder may have been sexually motivated and found over 100 used condoms in the area. Each one was tested, but none contained Karl's or Kate's DNA. While in prison, it was later reported that Karl had formed a friendship with none other than Levi Belfield, the man responsible for the murder of Millie Dowler. At the time, it wasn't known that Karl had also befriended Mark Dixie, whose crime we discussed in our episode on the murder of Sally Ann Bowman. According to Laura Richards, the former head of Scotland Yard's Homicide Prevention Unit, the three men began coaching each other for their upcoming trials, attempting to manipulate the system. Richards described how Belfield and Dixie formed a strange bond after being placed in adjoining cells at Belmarsh Prison. Eventually, they added Karl to their group and began using their influence over prison psychologists, manipulating them with their tactics and schemes. She explained that the three of them would stand trial within weeks of each other at the Old Bailey in London, a historic courthouse that had hosted some of the most infamous trials in British criminal history. Now, it was Karl Taylor's turn. The public gallery was filled with people eager to witness justice being served. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Karl continued to plead not guilty. The prosecution reminded the jury that Karl had already confessed to killing Kate, and the evidence corroborated his admission. The jury was told that Karl and Kate had met on May 18th at the CC Club in Piccadilly in central London. They agreed to go on a proper date in a couple of weeks, deciding on a pub in Richmond Hill. During the date, Kate seemed distant, appearing to ignore Karl and pay little attention to him. One witness later told the police that as soon as they sat down, Kate had her head down, texting on her phone. There was no real conversation, only Karl talking to her. She continued texting even as they left, heading toward a bench by the embankment. Karl had brought along a pair of scissors and a carving knife, both hidden up his sleeve. In his defense, Karl would testify, claiming that Kate was a kind and caring woman but was struggling emotionally and had intended to take her own life. He stated that he tried everything he could to stop her, but her injuries were so severe that there was no way she could have inflicted them upon herself. He argued that she must have fallen over and lost consciousness after stabbing herself. The prosecution, not convinced by his claims, rolled up a piece of paper to mimic a knife and handed it to Karl, asking him to demonstrate for the judge, jury, and court exactly how Kate could have stabbed herself in the face, neck, and head more than 30 times. Karl refused. Judge Giles Forrester then ordered Karl to comply, saying he was not in charge. Karl's attempt to show how Kate had allegedly stabbed herself was described as both ridiculous and embarrassing. He claimed that Kate had been prodding herself in the neck while pulling her hair, making her head move around, but the court was not swayed by his explanation. Karl continued with his version of events. "I didn't know what to do. I just stood there in awe. I realized she had passed away. I was crying profusely. I lay on the grass and looked at the sky. He then went on to say that he dragged her body to her car, and footage from CCTV showed him at a petrol station, where he bought just 1 pound's worth of fuel. Meanwhile, Kate's body was in the car's boot. During the trial, it was revealed that Karl had written a letter to Kate's family while he was held in his cell at Staines Police Station. In the letter, he introduced himself. "My name is Karl. I am the guy that met your daughter on Friday night." To be honest, my first impression of her was that she seemed like a kind but somewhat unhappy girl. Anyway, in the short time I spent with her, I began to see that she was an angel. Even though Katie is no longer with us, she still shines brightly like a star in the night sky. I might have taken your daughter's life, but we all know, some of us more than others, that her heart continues to beat in the good we do, and her soul lives on through the memories of her, which will stay with me forever. Many years ago, significant events destroyed my heart, but your lives and Katie's spirit remain with much respect. Katie's life won't just be a memory, but a real and lasting happiness. Angels live on earth, but sometimes they must go to heaven. He went on to say, "We live in a world where life is hard for all, and those who try to embrace the good in life are often rejected. What I did was wrong, there is no doubt about that. But ask yourself this, whose life have I really taken? I don't expect this letter to ease your pain, but like birds singing and flowers growing in the spring, remember Katie. Let the love you have for her and always will be like the heartbeat in your chest when she first opened her eyes. Whenever you miss her, think of a star, and I promise you she will be shining, just as I saw myself. She will always be with you, forever in your hearts. Remember, you haven't lost her because she hasn't lost you. Sometimes you don't have to touch a flower to make it grow." The detectives who intercepted the letter decided not to show it to Kate's family. Less than 2 hours after retiring to deliberate, the jury reached a verdict. Karl Taylor was found guilty. The public gallery erupted into applause as the sentence was announced. Life in prison with a minimum of 30 years to serve. The judge addressed Karl. "I am satisfied that this was a murder done for personal gain. You went to meet this girl armed with a knife. She was only seeking friendship from you, and you took advantage of her vulnerability for your own selfish purposes." Karl interrupted, saying, "I didn't, Your Honor." But Judge Forrester continued, "Your use of the knife was premeditated, and you concealed it on your person. After committing this horrific act, you callously disposed of her body. You were arrogant, manipulative, and highly dangerous."
Karl Taylor claimed Kate had stabbed herself, but the jury didn't believe him. Today, flowers mark the spot close to where she died. One message reads, "We miss you, Kate, and wish you were still this side of the rainbow."
Following the conviction, Kate's father spoke outside court.
"I speak for us all when I say our lives will never be the same again. Our family has been devastated and life seems empty and meaningless without Kate."
The case was now closed, and the dedication of the police was acknowledged. 7 detectives from Surrey Police, along with analysts from the Metropolitan Police, were commended for their tireless efforts. Deputy Chief Constable Craig Denholm stated that this difficult investigation, which spanned 3 force areas and multiple crime scenes, had culminated in securing a conviction and a life sentence for the offender. The successful conviction was a testament to the officers' excellent teamwork. The brutality that Kate endured in her final moments is the stuff of nightmares. The sheer cruelty with which Karl disposed of her body made it even worse. Although Karl received life with a minimum of 30 years, Kate's family would be serving their own life sentences, ones they would never be free from. Kate's father, Alan, expressed the depth of their grief. I still feel empty and cold, and I will never lose that feeling. Kate was so vibrant, so full of life. What must it have been like for her in those final moments, when she was so violently struck down? The terror and confusion she must have felt, it's unimaginable. The impact of this brutal, senseless act has changed the lives of so many forever. My wife can find no comfort. All she sees is emptiness for the rest of her life. If you'd like to support our channel and help us keep creating content, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us, and we truly appreciate it.